Picture a quiet village, a dusty journal, and a mystery unsolved for 100 years. Lady Eleanor Ashford vanished in 1925, leaving behind a sapphire necklace, a cryptic note, and whispers of scandal. Enter Miss Marple, a sharp-eyed sleuth, unraveling clues hidden in manor ruins, crescent moon carvings, a secret earring, and a letter that changes everything. Was Eleanor a runaway bride or a clever escape artist? In 5 thrilling chapters, follow Miss Marple as she digs through the past, outsmarts rumors, and reveals a truth that rewrites history. Ready for a tale of courage and secrets? Let's solve the mystery. Chapter 1. The Letter from the Past. The wind danced through St. Mary Mead, tossing golden autumn leaves against the windows of Miss Jane Marple's small, tidy cottage. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room. Miss Marple sat in her favorite armchair, her knitting needles clicking like a soft heartbeat. A ball of soft blue yarn rested in her lap, and her sharp eyes darted between the stitches and the world outside. She loved these quiet moments where the village seemed to hush, and her mind could wander through the puzzles of life. The clock on the mantel ticked past 3 when she heard the familiar crunch of gravel under boots. It was Tom, the postman. With his cheerful whistle, Miss Marple set her knitting aside and opened the door just as he reached the step. "Afternoon, Miss Marple," Tom said, tipping his cap. "Got something special for you today?" He handed her a small parcel wrapped in brown paper tied with twine and a letter with a fancy wax seal. The parcel felt heavy for its size, and the letter had a faint smell of old books. "Thank you. It's Tom," Miss Marple said, her voice kind but curious. She closed the door and carried the items to her table, where a teapot steamed gently. The letter was addressed to Miss J. Marple, St. Mary Mead, in neat, looping handwriting. She broke the seal and unfolded the paper, her fingers careful with the crisp edges. The letter was from a solicitor named Mr. Harold Weston in London. It read, "Dear Miss Marple, I hope this finds you well. Enclosed is a journal discovered during the demolition of Ashford Manor, a grand estate abandoned since 1925. The journal, written by a maid, concerns the unsolved disappearance of Lady Eleanor Ashford. A note with the journal requested it be sent to a person of keen intellect to unravel the truth. Your reputation for solving mysteries has reached even our dusty offices. Should you accept this challenge, please inform me. The journal is yours to keep. Yours sincerely, Harold Weston, Esq." Miss Marple's lips curved into a small smile. "A mystery from the past," she murmured. "How intriguing." She turned her attention to the parcel, unwrapping the paper to reveal a leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn, the edges frayed, and a faint embossing of a crescent moon adorned the front. The pages inside were yellowed, some sticking together, and the ink had faded in spots. A faint, musty scent rose as she opened it, like the breath of a long-forgotten room. She poured a cup of tea, settled back in her chair, and began to read. The journal belonged to a maid named Clara, who served Lady Eleanor Ashford at Ashford Manor in 1925. Clara's handwriting was small and precise, each entry dated. The first few pages described daily life at the manor, polishing silver, airing linens, and preparing for a grand ball. But as Miss Marple read on, the tone shifted. Clara wrote of whispers among the staff, of Lady Eleanor's beauty and her sparkling sapphire necklace, a gift from her fiancé, Lord Reginald Blackwood. The final entry, dated the night of the ball, was the most gripping. Clara wrote, "Tonight Lady Eleanor wore her sapphire necklace, but her eyes were sad. She argued with Lord Blackwood in the library. I saw her slip a note into her glove. Meet me at the old oak at midnight. By morning, she was gone. The necklace, too. Some say she ran off with a lover. Others say worse. I dare not write more." Miss Marple closed the journal and sipped her tea, her mind already turning. "A missing lady, a valuable necklace, and a secret note," she said, softly, Clara knew something she didn't share. She leaned back, her eyes narrowing as she pictured Ashford Manor in its glory days. A grand house with tall windows, chandeliers glittering, and guests in fine gowns. But beneath the sparkle, something dark had stirred. She rose and walked to her bookshelf, pulling down an old atlas. Her finger traced the map to a village called Ashford, about 50 miles away. The manor, Clara wrote, stood on a hill overlooking the village, surrounded by gardens and a thick forest. Miss Marple imagined the old oak tree from the note, its branches heavy with secrets. Why did Eleanor disappear? She wondered aloud. And why leave the note where someone could find it? The fire popped, and Miss Marple glanced at the journal again. The crescent moon on the cover caught her eye. It wasn't just decoration, it felt deliberate, like a clue. She made a mental note to watch for that symbol. Her thoughts drifted. To Lady Eleanor, a young woman, perhaps 20, with the world at her feet. Engaged to a lord, yet unhappy. The sapphire necklace was no small thing. Such jewels were worth a fortune, enough to start a new life. Had Eleanor stolen away with a lover, as the rumor said? Or had something else happened under that oak tree? Miss Marple's mind worked, like a quilt, stitching together scraps of information. Clara's journal was careful, almost too careful. The maid mentioned the note, but not its contents until the end, as if guarding a secret. Lord Blackwood's argument with Eleanor hinted at troubled jealousy, perhaps, or greed. And the lover, if he existed, was a shadow in the story, unnamed and unseen. Miss Marple knew better than to trust rumors. In St. Mary Mead, she'd heard plenty of gossip, most of it wrong. People saw what they wanted to see, not what was true. She picked up the letter from Mr. Weston again, rereading the part about the journal's discovery. Ashford Manor had been torn down only last month, its stones carted away for new buildings. The journal was found in a hidden compartment in the library wall, along with the note requesting a keen intellect. Miss Marple wondered who had hidden it. Clara, Eleanor, someone else. The manor had been empty for 100 years, its secrets locked away until now. The clock chimed 4, and Miss Marple realized she'd been lost in thought for nearly an hour. She smiled to herself. "Okay, no use sitting here spinning stories," she said. "I need facts." She decided to visit Ashford Village and see the manor's ruins for herself. There might be clues: the demolition crew, missed a carving, a hidden box, or even that old oak tree. And the village folk would have stories passed down through generations. In her experience, old tales often held grains of truth. She wrote a quick reply to Mr. Weston, accepting the challenge and promising to keep him informed. Then she packed a small suitcase with essentials: a warm shawl, her notebook, and a magnifying glass she'd used in past mysteries. Her nephew Raymond would fuss if he knew she was off on another adventure. But Miss Marple wasn't one to sit idle. "A puzzle is a puzzle," she said, tucking the journal into her bag. "And this one's waited 100 years for me." The next morning, Miss Marple caught the early train to Ashford. The countryside rolled by, fields golden with harvest and trees blazing red and orange. She sat by the window, the journal open in her lap, rereading Clara's entries. Each word felt like a breadcrumb leading deeper into the mystery. The train rattled along, and Miss Marple's thoughts kept pace. Why had Eleanor argued with Lord Blackwood? What was the note's purpose? And that sapphire necklace, had it been stolen, or had Eleanor taken it herself? As the train neared Ashford, Miss Marple closed the journal and looked out at the village nestled in a valley. A church spire rose above the roof trees, and beyond it a hill where Ashford Manor once stood. Even from a distance, she could see the dark smudge of ruins against the green. Her heart quickened. Something happened that night, she thought, and I mean to find out what. The train slowed, and Miss Marple gathered her things, stepped onto the platform where a cool breeze carried the scent of wood smoke. A young man in a tweed coat waited nearby, holding a sign that read Miss Marple. He introduced himself as Thomas, Mr. Weston's assistant, sent to help her. "The manor's just up the hill, ma'am," he said, taking her suitcase. "It's a sad sight now, but I'll show you where we found the journal." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes already scanning the village, the cobblestone streets, the tidy shops. The old men gossiping outside the pubit reminded her of St. Mary Mead. People here would talk, and she knew how to listen. "Tell me, Thomas," she said as they walked, "what do the villagers say about Lady Eleanor?" Thomas hesitated, then lowered his voice. "They say she was beautiful but cursed. Some think she was murdered for that necklace. Others say she ran off with a painter and broke her family's heart. There's even talk of ghosts in the manor ruins." He shivered. "Gives me the creeps, to be honest." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Ghosts are just stories we tell when we don't understand." "The truth," she said. "Let's start with the manor. I'd like to see where you found that journal." They climbed the hill, the path winding through tall grass and wildflowers. The ruins of Ashford Manor came into view, crumbled walls, broken arches, and a lone chimney standing like a sentinel. Ivy clung to the stones, and the air felt heavy, as if the past lingered here. Miss Marple's eyes swept the scene, noting the layout: the main hall, the garden's edge, and, in the distance, a massive oak tree, its branches gnarled with age. Thomas led her to a pile of rubble that was once the library. "We found the journal here," he said, pointing to a cracked stone wall. "There was a hollow space behind it, sealed tight. Took a crowbar to get it open." Miss Marple knelt, her fingers brushing the stone. She noticed a faint carving, a crescent moon, just like the one on the journal's cover. "Interesting," she said, her voice calm but her mind racing. The symbol was no accident. 'Twas a marker, a sign someone wanted found. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I'd like to see that oak tree next," she said. As they walked toward the tree, Miss Marple felt the weight of the mystery settle over her. A missing lady, a hidden journal, a sapphire necklace, and a note about a midnight meeting. Pieces didn't fit yet, but they would. They always did. She glanced at the oak, its roots twisting into the earth like secrets waiting to be dug up. 100 years, she thought. But time doesn't hide the truth from those who know where to look. Chapter 2. A Journey to Ashford Manor. Miss Jane Marple stood at the edge of Ashford Manor's ruins, the morning sun casting long shadows over the broken stones. The air smelled of damp earth and ivy, and a breeze rustled the tall grass around her feet. She adjusted her shawl, her sharp eyes scanning the crumbled walls and shattered windows. The manor had been grand once, a place of laughter and light, but now it was a skeleton, its secrets buried in the rubble. Beside her, Thomas, the young solicitor's assistant, shifted nervously, his tweed coat dusted with dirt from their climb up the hill. "This is it, Miss Marple," Thomas said, pointing to the ruins, "or what's left of it. The demolition crew took most of the stones for new buildings, but some bits are still standing." He glanced at the dark forest beyond the manor, where the old oak tree loomed. "Gives me chills, this place. The villagers say it's haunted." Miss Marple's lips twitched into a small smile. "Haunted, you say?" "I've found that ghosts are often just stories people tell when they don't know the truth." She stepped forward, her sensible shoes crunching on gravel. "Let's have a look around. There's more here than meets the eye, I'm sure." Thomas nodded and led the way, picking a path through the debris. Miss Marple followed, her mind buzzing with the details from Clara's journal. Lady Eleanor Ashford, the beautiful heiress, had vanished after a grand ball in 1925, along with her sapphire necklace. A note found in her room read, "Meet me at the old oak at midnight." Clara, the maid, hinted at a lover, a scandal, and an argument with Lord Reginald Blackwood, Eleanor's fiancé. The journal, hidden for a century, has been found in a secret compartment in the library wall, marked with a crescent moon symbol. That symbol, Miss Marple knew, was a clue, maybe the key to the whole mystery. As they reached the heart of the ruins, Miss Marple paused by a cracked stone pillar. She ran her fingers over it, feeling for anything unusual. Her eyes caught a faint carving in the stone, a crescent moon, just like the one on the journal's cover. "Thomas, look at this," she said, pointing. "This symbol again. It's no coincidence." Thomas leaned closer, squinting. "Blimey, you're right. I didn't notice that before. The crew probably missed it. Too busy hauling stones away." He scratched his head. "What do you think it means?" "I'm not sure yet," Miss Marple said, her voice calm, but her mind racing. "But someone wanted it noticed. Maybe Eleanor herself." She made a mental note to watch for more crescent moons. Symbols like that weren't carved for nothing, they were messages. Left for those who knew how to read them. They moved deeper into the ruins, passing what was once the grand hall. Broken tiles peeked through the dirt, their patterns faded, but still elegant. Miss Marple pictured the ball described in Clara's journal. Ladies in glittering gowns, men in sharp suits, and Eleanor at the center, her sapphire necklace catching the light. But her eyes had been sad, Clara wrote. Why? Was it the argument with Lord Blackwood? Or the mysterious lover the villagers whispered about? "Thomas," Miss Marple said, stopping by a pile of rubble, "tell me more about what the villagers say. You mentioned a painter, didn't you?" Thomas nodded, kicking a loose stone. "Aye, that's the story. They say Eleanor was sweet on a painter named James Harrow. Folks think he stole her necklace and they ran off together. But others say Lord Blackwood did something awful, maybe even killed her out of jealousy. The necklace was worth a fortune. You know, enough to make anyone greedy?" Miss Marple nodded thoughtfully. Greed and love were powerful motives, and she'd seen both tear lives apart in St. Mary Mead. But stories grew wild over time, like weeds. She needed facts, not rumors. "And the ghosts?" she asked, her tone light. "What do they say about those?" Thomas shivered, glancing at the forest. "They say Eleanor's spirit wanders the manor at night, looking for her necklace. Some swear they've seen a lady in a white dress by the oak tree. I don't believe it, mind you, but it's what folks say." Miss Marple chuckled softly. "People see what they expect to see," she said. "A white dress could be moonlight on a branch. But stories like that often hide something real. Let's keep looking." They continued through the ruins, Miss Marple's eyes sharp for anything out of place. She noticed the layout of the manor, the main hall opening to a terrace, the garden sloping toward the forest, and the oak tree standing like a silent guard. Clara's note about the midnight meeting stuck in her mind. Why meet at the oak? It was far from the house, hidden by trees. A perfect spot for a secret dot. As they neared the garden's edge, Miss Marple spotted a low stone wall, half buried in ivy. She knelt, brushing the leaves aside, and found another crescent moon carved into a cornerstone. "Another one," she said, her voice steady but excited. "This is a trail, Thomas. Someone left these marks on purpose." Thomas crouched beside her, his eyes wide. "You think Eleanor did it? Or maybe Clara, perhaps," Miss Marple said, standing. "Or someone else who knew what happened that night. We'll need to find more of these symbols. They're leading us somewhere." By noon, the sun was high, and Miss Marple's stomach growled. Thomas suggested they head to the village inn for lunch and a chance to talk to the locals. "The inn's been around forever," he said. "The folks there love a good story. Maybe they'll know something about Eleanor." Miss Marple agreed, and they walked down the hill to the village. Ashford was a cozy place with cobblestone streets, flower baskets hanging from lampposts, and a small church with a weathered steeple. The inn, called the Blue Boar, was a sturdy building with a sign creaking in the breeze. Inside it was warm and bustling, with the smell of fresh bread and stew. A few old men sat by the bar, nursing pints, while a barmaid polished glasses. Thomas found a table near the window, and Miss Marple settled into a cushioned chair. She ordered tea and a bowl of soup, her eyes drifting over the room. The inn felt like a hub, a place where secrets were shared over mugs of ale. She knew how to listen, how to nudge people into talking without them realizing it. In St. Mary Mead, she'd solved many a mystery just by sipping tea and letting others fill the silence. The barmaid, a cheerful woman named Molly, brought their food. "You're the lady asking about the manor, aren't you?" she said, setting down Miss Marple's tea. "Whole village is buzzing about it." Miss Marple smiled warmly. "I'm just curious, my dear. Such an old story. Do you know anyone who might remember tales about Lady Eleanor?" Ali glanced around, then leaned closer. "You should talk to Mrs. Grayson. She's near 80, lives in the cottage by the church. Her gran worked at the manor back in the day. She's got stories that'll make your hair curl." "Thank you, Molly," Miss Marple said, slipping her a small tip. "I'll pay Mrs. Grayson a visit." As they ate, Thomas filled her in on the village. Ashford was small, with families who'd lived there for generations. The manor's fall had been a blowjob's lost, the hill left empty. Now, with the ruins gone, some hoped for new houses or shops, but others clung to the old tales. "I love their mysteries," Thomas said, grinning. "Keeps the place lively." Miss Marple nodded, her spoon pausing midair. Mysteries kept people talking, and talking led to truth. She finished her soup, her mind sorting the morning's clues. The crescent moon carvings, the oak tree, the rumors of a painter and a jealous lord. Clara's journal was the heart of it, but it held back as much as it revealed. Why had Clara written it? To confess? To protect someone? Or to keep the mystery alive? After lunch, Miss Marple and Thomas walked to Mrs. Grayson's cottage. The path wound past the church, where gravestones leaned under ancient yews. The cottage was small, with a thatched roof and roses climbing the walls. Miss Marple knocked, and a frail voice called, "Come in." Mrs. Grayson sat by a fire, a quilt over her knees. Her hair was white as snow, and her eyes were bright despite her age. "You must be Miss Marple," she said, waving them to chairs. "Molly said you're poking into the manor business." Miss Marple smiled, settling down. "I am, Mrs. Grayson. I've read a maid's journal about Lady Eleanor's disappearance. I hear your grandmother worked at the manor. Do you know any stories?" Mrs. Grayson's eyes twinkled. "Oh, my gran told me plenty. She was a kitchen maid, saw everything. Said Lady Eleanor was like a princess, with hair like gold and a laugh that made you smile. But she wasn't happy. Lord Blackwood, her fiancé, was a cold man. Wanted her money, not her heart. Gran said Eleanor had a secret boa painter named James Harrow. They met in the gardens, away from prying eyes." Miss Marple leaned forward, her hands folded. "Did your grandmother think Eleanor ran off with him?" Mrs. Grayson hesitated, her fingers plucking at the quilt. "That's what most believed. The necklace was gone, and so was she. But Gran said something else. She saw Eleanor the night of the ball slipping out to the oak tree. Gran thought she looked scared, not in love. And the next day, when they found the note, Gran said it didn't feel right. Like it was meant to be found." Miss Marple's heart quickened. "Meant to be found," she repeated. "That's very interesting. Did your grandmother ever mention a crescent moon symbol?" Mrs. Grayson frowned, thinking. "Not that I recall, but Gran did say the manor had secrets hidden places in the walls, under stones. She found a little box once, in the garden, but it was empty. She never told anyone but me." Miss Marple nodded, her mind stitching the clues together. A note meant to be found, a hidden box, crescent moons marking the way. Eleanor's fear, not love. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but it was still blurry. She thanked Mrs. Grayson and promised to visit again, then stepped outside. With Thomas, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky pink. Miss Marple looked up at the hill, where the manor's ruins glowed in the fading light. "Tomorrow, Thomas," she said, "we'll go back to the ruins. I want to find that oak tree and look for more crescent moons. And I think the garden might hold something, too." Thomas nodded, though his face was uneasy. "You really think you'll solve it, Miss Marple?" After all these ZI years? She smiled, her eyes sharp as needles. Time hides things, Thomas, but it doesn't erase them. Not if you know where to look. They walked back to the inn, the village quiet around them. Miss Marple's mind churned, piecing together the morning's discoveries with Mrs. Grayson's story. Eleanor hadn't been a runaway bride or a victim. She'd been clever, maybe desperate. The note, the necklace, the crescent moons were part of a plan one Miss Marple was determined to uncover. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where every gossip held a kernel of truth, and New Ashford was no different. The truth was here, in the stones, the stories, and the shadows of that old oak tree. As she climbed the inn stairs to her room, Miss Marple felt a spark of excitement. 100 years was a long time, but mysteries didn't fade, they waited, and she was ready to listen. Chapter 3. The Hidden Clue. The morning sun peeked through the curtains of Miss Jane Marple's room at the Blue Boar Inn, casting soft light on the journal resting on her bedside table. She sat up, her shawl draped over her shoulders, and sipped tea from a chipped cup. Her mind was already at work, stitching together the clues from yesterday's visit to Ashford Manor's ruins and her talk with Mrs. Grayson. The crescent moon carvings, the old oak tree, and the story of Lady Eleanor. Ashford's disappearance in 1925 swirled in her thoughts. Today she was determined to find more pieces of the puzzle. Miss Marple, dressed in her usual neat skirt and blouse, pinning her hat firmly in place. She tucked Clara's journal, the maid's account of Eleanor's last night, into her bag along with her notebook and magnifying glass. The journal's final entry haunted her. Eleanor slipping a note into her glove that read, "Meet me at the old oak at midnight," then vanishing with her sapphire necklace. Mrs. Grayson's words echoed. Eleanor had looked scared, not in love, and the note seemed meant to be found. Miss Marple's instincts told her the truth lay hidden in the manor's ruins, waiting for someone to uncover it. Downstairs, Thomas waited in the inn's cozy dining room, munching on toast. "Morning, Miss Marple," he said, brushing crumbs from his tweed coat. "Ready to poke around the ruins again?" "I reckon that oak tree's got something to tell us." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. I believe you're right, Thomas. And I want to check the garden, too. Mrs. Grayson mentioned a box her grandmother found there. It might be nothing, but small things often lead to big answers. They set off up the hill, the village of Ashford waking around them. Shopkeepers swept their steps, and children scampered to school, their laughter fading as the path steepened. The manor's ruins loomed ahead, broken stones tangled with ivy under a graying sky. Miss Marple's heart quickened. The place felt alive with secrets, as if the past whispered in the rustling leaves. At the ruins, Miss Marple headed straight for the old oak tree, its gnarled branches clawing at the sky. It stood at the edge of the forest, far from the manor's main hall, a perfect spot for a secret meeting. She circled the tree, her eyes scanning the trunk and roots. The bark was rough, scarred with age, and moss clung to its base. She knelt, brushing dirt away, and noticed a hollow at the foot of the tree, half hidden by roots. "Double quotes, Thomas. Bring your lantern," she called. He hurried over, holding the light as she peered into the hollow. Inside was a rusted tin box, its lid dented, but intact. Miss Marple's fingers trembled with excitement as she eased it out, careful not to break it. The box was small, no bigger than a book, and heavy for its size. She brushed off the dirt and pried it open with her penknife, and side gleamed a single sapphire earring shaped like a teardrop, its blue stone catching the light. Miss Marple held it up, her breath catching. "Half of a pair," she murmured. "This must belong to Eleanor's necklace." Thomas's eyes widened. "Blimey, that's a beauty. You think she hid it here? But why just one?" Miss Marple tucked the earring into her bag, her mind racing. "I don't know yet, but it's a clue." The necklace was said to be a set, maybe earrings and a pendant. Hiding one piece suggests a plan, not a theft. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. Let's keep this quiet for now, Thomas. No need to stir up the village. They moved back to the ruins, Miss Marple's thoughts on the earring. Clara's journal described the sapphire necklace as Eleanor's pride, a gift from Lord Reginald Blackwood, her fiancé. Yet it vanished with her sparking rumors of a lover, James Harrow, the painter, who stole it. The earring in the oak tree didn't fit that story. Why hide it? And why in such a secret place? As they crossed the garden, Miss Marple remembered. She scanned the overgrown beds, where rose bushes had gone wild and stone paths cracked under weeds. At the garden's center stood the remains of a fountain, its basin dry and choked with leaves. Miss Marple paused, her eyes narrowing. The fountain's base was carved with vines and flowers, but something stood out, a crescent moon symbol, etched into the stone. Another one, she said, pointing. Thomas, help me clear these leaves. They swept away the debris, revealing the fountain's cracked base. Miss Marple ran her fingers over the crescent moon, feeling for anything unusual. The stone was smooth, but one edge seemed loose, as if it could move. She pressed it, and with a faint click, a small panel slid open, revealing a sealed lead case inside. Thomas gasped, but Miss Marple stayed calm, her heart pounding. She lifted the case out, its surface cold and heavy. It was locked, but the lock was old and rusted. Thomas fetched a crowbar from the ruins, and together they pried it open. Inside was a folded letter, its paper brittle but intact. Miss Marple unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. It read, "My dearest family, I cannot marry Reginald. My heart belongs to another. I leave tonight, and I beg your forgiveness. Do not search for me. I will be safe. Eleanor." The letter was dated the night of the ball, October 15th, 1925. Miss Marple read it again, her mind piecing together the words. "This changes everything," she said softly. Eleanor planned to leave, but why hide this letter? And who was the other she loved? Thomas scratched his head. Maybe James Harrow, the painter everyone talks about. Perhaps Miss Marple said, folding the letter into her bag. But I'm not so sure. Stories grow legs over time. We need more than rumors. She looked at the fountain, then back at the oak tree. The crescent moons, the earring, the letter, they were a trail left by someone clever. Eleanor, she suspected, had orchestrated her own disappearance. But the why and how were still shadows. They spent the afternoon searching the ruins for more crescent moons, but found none. Miss Marple's legs ached, and the sky was turning stormy. So they headed back to the village. At the inn, she spread her finds on her room's small table. The journal, the earring, and the letter. She sat by the window, rain pattering against the glass, and opened her notebook. She wrote down every detail, her pen scratching as her mind worked. The earring bothered her most. If Eleanor had taken the necklace to sell it, why leave one piece? Behind it was worth money, yet hidden in a place only someone clever would find. The oak tree was no random choice. It was named in the note, a note Clara said was meant to be found. Miss Marple tapped her pen, thinking of St. Mary Mead, where people left clues in plain sight to misdirect. Was the note a trick? A way to make people think Eleanor had run off with a lover? She turned to the letter. Eleanor's words were clear. She loved someone else and wouldn't marry Reginald. But hiding the letter in the fountain suggested she didn't want it found right away. Maybe she'd meant it for later, when the scandal had faded. Miss Marple pictured Eleanor at the ball, her sapphire necklace glinting, her eyes hiding fear. Clara had seen her slip the note into her glove, then argue with Reginald. Had he suspected her plan, or was someone else watching? Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to James Harrow, the painter. Mrs. Grayson's grandmother had seen Eleanor meeting him in the gardens, but the old woman doubted they'd run off together. The earring's design nagged at her was unique, with tiny silver leaves around the sapphire. She'd seen something like it before, but where? Then it hit her, the village museum. Thomas had mentioned a painting of Eleanor there, done by Harrow. Maybe it showed the necklace. She bundled up against the rain and walked to the museum, a small building next to the church. The curator, a wiry man named Mr. Finch, greeted her warmly. "Heard you're digging into the manor mystery?" he said, leading her to a portrait in a dim corner. "This is Lady Eleanor, painted by James Harrow in 1924. Miss Marple studied the painting, her breath catching. Eleanor was stunning, with golden hair and soft eyes, wearing a blue gown. Around her neck was a sapphire necklace with a pendant, and two teardrop earrings, one matching the one from the oak tree. The background showed the manor's garden with the fountain clearly visible, and there, carved into the fountain's base, was a crescent moon. "Look at that," Miss Marple said, pointing. "It's the same symbol. Harrow knew about it." Finch peered closer. "Didn't notice that before. Harrow was a queer one, they say. Loved Eleanor, but she was promised to Lord Blackwood. He left Ashford after she vanished, never painted again." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. The painting was a clue. Harrow had included the crescent moon deliberately, maybe to point to the fountain. Had he helped Eleanor escape, or was he part of her plan? She thanked Mr. Finch and returned to the inn, her shoes damp but her spirits high. Back in her room, Miss Marple sat by the fire, the earring and letter before her. She opened Clara's journal, rereading the night of the ball. Clara had seen Eleanor slip the note into her glove, but she didn't say who it was for. The maid's words felt careful, as if hiding something. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Clara knew more than she wrote, she murmured. Maybe she helped Eleanor? She thought of the crescent moons on the journal, the pillar, the garden wall, the fountain, and now the painting. They were a map, guiding her to the truth. The earring and letter were proof Eleanor hadn't just run off, she'd left a trail. But for whom? And why hide it so well? Miss Marple leaned back, the fire crackling. The rain had stopped, and moonlight spilled through the window, silver, like the leaves on the earring. She pictured Eleanor under the oak tree, slipping the earring into the tin box, her heart racing as midnight neared. The note, the argument, the necklace, it was all part of a bigger plan. One Miss Marple was close to unraveling. Tomorrow she'd return to the ruins with Thomas, searching for more clues. The garden, the fountain, the oak, they held the next steps. She closed her notebook, her mind sharp as a needle. 100 years, she thought, but the truth doesn't fade. It waits. Chapter 4. Unraveling the Truth. Miss Jane Marple sat at the small wooden table in her room at the Blue Boar Inn, the fire casting a warm glow over her finds. Clara's journal, the sapphire earring, and Eleanor's letter lay before her, each a piece of the puzzle that was Lady Eleanor Ashford's disappearance in 1925. Outside, the village of Ashford slept under a starry sky. But Miss Marple's mind was wide awake, stitching together the clues she'd gathered. The crescent moon symbols, the oak tree, the fountain, and the painting in the museum, they all pointed to a truth hidden for 100 years. Tonight, she meant to make sense of it. She sipped her tea, now cold, and opened her notebook. Neat handwriting filled the pages, notes on the journal's cryptic entries. The earring's silver leaves and the letter's desperate words. Eleanor had written, "I cannot marry Reginald. My heart belongs to another. Forgive me." The letter, hidden in the fountain's secret compartment, was dated the night of the ball, when Eleanor vanished with her sapphire necklace. Clara, the maid, had seen her slip a note into her glove, "Meet me at the old oak at midnight," and argued with Lord Reginald Blackwood, her fiancé. The earring found in a tin box under the oak matched the necklace in James Harrow's painting, and those crescent moons carved in stone and painted on canvas tied it all together. Miss Marple leaned back, her eyes narrowing. "It's a trail," she murmured. "Eleanor left it on purpose." A lie. She pictured the young heiress, beautiful and trapped, planning her escape from a loveless marriage. The note in her glove, the earring in the tree, the letter in the fountain, they weren't accidents. They were deliberate, like breadcrumbs for someone to follow. But who? And why hide them so well? She turned to Clara's journal, rereading the final entry. Clara's words were careful, describing Eleanor's sad eyes and the argument with Reginald, but leaving out details. Clara knew more than she wrote, Miss Marple said softly. The maid had seen the note but didn't say who it was for. She mentioned the necklace but not its fate. And the journal itself, hidden in the library wall with a crescent moon symbol, felt like part of the plan. Had Clara helped Eleanor? Or was she protecting someone else? Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the crescent moons. They marked the journal, a pillar in the ruins, a garden wall, the fountain, and Harrow's painting. Each one was a signpost, guiding her deeper into the mystery. The earring bothered her most. Why hide one piece of a valuable necklace? It was worth money, yet tucked away in a hollow tree. The letter, too, was "Oh, do I not send it to her family?" Hiding it suggested Eleanor wanted it found later, when the scandal had faded. Miss Marple tapped her pen, her mind working like a quilt. Piecing together scraps of truth, she thought of St. Mary Mead, where gossip often hid facts in plain sight. The village rumors about Eleanor running off with James Harrow, murdered by Reginald, or cursed by her necklace, were colorful but shaky. Mrs. Grayson's story was more solid. Her grandmother, a kitchen maid, had seen Eleanor meet Harrow in the gardens, but doubted they'd eloped. She'd also seen Eleanor slip out to the oak tree, looking scared, and thought the note was meant to be found. With Miss Marple, suggested a trick, a way to misdirect. She set the journal aside and picked up the earring, its sapphire glinting in the firelight. The silver leaves around the stone were delicate, unique. Harrow's painting showed Eleanor, wearing the full set, a pendant and 2 earrings. Finding one earring under the oak meant the set had been split. Had Eleanor sold the rest to start a new life? Or was the earring a message left for someone specific? Miss Marple's instincts told her Eleanor was cleverer than the rumors allowed. She hadn't just run away, she'd planned every step. A knock at the door startled her. It was Thomas, his hair damp from a late walk. "Sorry to bother you, Miss Marple," he said, stepping inside. "I was at the pub, and the lads were talking about the manor. One said his granddad found a crescent moon carved on a bridge near the village years ago. Thought you'd want to know." Miss Marple's eyes lit up. "Another crescent moon. It's very helpful, Thomas. Where's this bridge?" "It's past the church over the stream," he said. "It's old falling. Apart now? Want me to take you there tomorrow?" "Yes, please," she said, her mind already racing. "And let's visit Mrs. Grayson again. I have more questions about her grandmother." She thanked Thomas, and he left, promising to meet her at breakfast. Alone again, Miss Marple turned back to her notebook. The bridge's crescent moon was another clue, maybe part of Eleanor's trail. She pictured the heiress moving through the manor that night, her gown rustling as she hid the earring and letter. The note in her glove, found by Clara, had sent everyone looking for a lover. But what if that was the point? A distraction to keep people from the truth. She thought of James Harrow, the painter. The village gossiped about him stealing Eleanor away, but Mrs. Grayson's grandmother doubted it. Harrow's painting, with its crescent moon on the fountain, showed he knew something. Had he helped Eleanor escape, or was he a decoy, like the note? Miss Marple's mind circled Reginald, too. Clara wrote of their argument, and rumors painted him as greedy. Had he discovered Eleanor's plan? Or was he just a scorned man, left to face the scandal? The fire popped, and Miss Marple glanced at the clock past 10. She closed her notebook and stood, stretching her stiff legs. Tomorrow, she'd check the bridge and talk to Mrs. Grayson. But tonight, she needed one more piece of the puzzle. She pulled on her coat and slipped out, the inn quiet around her. The village was dark, save for moonlight on the cobblestones. She walked to the church where the bridge arched over a trickling stream. The bridge was old, its stones mossy and cracked. Miss Marple held her small flashlight, sweeping it over the surface. Near the center, she found it a crescent moon carved deep into a stone. She knelt, her fingers tracing the lines. It was weathered, but clear, like the others. "Eleanor, you were clever," she whispered. The bridge was on the path from the manor to the village, a place someone fleeing might pass. Another breadcrumb dot back at the inn. Miss Marple slept lightly, her dreams filled with oak trees and sapphires. Morning came with a drizzle, and she met Thomas at the inn's dining room, where bacon sizzled and tea steamed. "We'll see Mrs. Grayson first," she said, buttering toast. "I want to know more about her grandmother's time at the manor." They walked to the cottage, rain pattering on their umbrellas. Mrs. Grayson welcomed them, her fire crackling as she offered tea. "Back so soon, Miss Marple," she said, her eyes curious. "Found something, have you?" Miss Marple smiled, settling into a chair. "Few things. Mrs. Grayson, your grandmother's stories are very helpful. You said she saw Eleanor go to the oak tree, looking scared. Did she ever mention helping Eleanor, or knowing her plans?" Mrs. Grayson's hands stilled on her quilt, her face thoughtful. "Gran was cagey about that. She loved Eleanor, said she was kind to the staff. Once, when I was little, Gran let slip she'd done something for Eleanor that night. I asked what, but she shushed me, said it was to keep Eleanor safe." Miss Marple's heart quickened. Keep her safe? Did she say from what? Grayson frowned, thinking, not exactly. But she mentioned Lord Blackwood. Said he was furious after the ball, tearing through the manor, shouting about the necklace. Gran thought he cared more about the jewels than Eleanor. She never believed Eleanor ran off with Harrow. Said that was a story to fool folks. Marple nodded, her mind clicking. "And the box your grandmother found in the garden, did she say? Where exactly?" "Near the fountain," Mrs. Grayson said. "She was weeding and saw a loose stone. The box was empty, but she thought it was odd, so she kept quiet." Miss Marple thanked her, promising to return. Outside, the rain had stopped, and she turned to Thomas. "Let's check the bridge again, then back to the ruins. I think we're close to something." At the bridge, Miss Marple studied the crescent moon carving, but found no hidden compartments. It was a marker, she decided, part of Eleanor's path. They hiked to the ruins, the air damp and heavy. Miss Marple went to the fountain where she'd found the letter. She searched for more loose stones, but found none. The oak tree was next, but the hollow held no more secrets. She stood by the tree, picturing Eleanor slipping the earring into the tin box, her hands trembling as midnight neared. Back at the inn, Miss Marple spread her clues on the table again. The earring, the letter, the journal, the crescent moons, they told a story of escape, not theft or murder. Eleanor had planned to leave Reginald, maybe with help from Clara and Harrow. The note in her glove was a decoy meant to make people think she'd eloped. The earring and letter hidden carefully, or for someone to find later proof she'd chosen her own path. Miss Marple's mind turned to Harrow's painting. The crescent moon on the fountain showed he knew about the hiding place. Had he painted it as a clue? Or was he part of Eleanor's plan, helping her stage her disappearance? She thought of Clara, too. The maid's journal was selective, leaving out key details. Mrs. Grayson's grandmother had helped Eleanor, and Clara might have, too. The journal, hidden with a crescent moon, was Clara's way of preserving the mystery while protecting Eleanor's secret. She wrote in her notebook, Eleanor planned her escape. Note was a trick. Earring and letter were proof. Clara and maybe Harrow helped. Crescent moons marked the way. The pieces fit, but one question remained. Where had Eleanor gone? Miss Marple closed her eyes, picturing the heiress crossing the bridge, leaving the manor behind. The crescent moon there suggested a destination, maybe a new life. She stood, her resolve firm. Tomorrow, she'd search village records for traces of Eleanor after 1925. A new name, A marriage, a quiet life, something would show. The truth was close, like a thread ready to be pulled. Miss Marple smiled, the firelight dancing on the earring. "You were brave, Eleanor," she thought. "I'm almost there." Chapter 5. The Final Revelation. Miss Jane Marple sat by the window of her room at the Blue Boar Inn, the morning light soft on her face. The village of Ashford stirred outside with the clatter of carts and the chatter of early risers. On the table before her lay Clara's journal, the sapphire earring, Eleanor's letter, and her notebook, filled with neat rows of clues. The mystery of Lady Eleanor Ashford's disappearance in 1925 was nearly solved, and Miss Marple felt the thrill of a puzzle coming together. Today she would find the final pieces and give the century-old story its proper ending. She sipped her tea, her mind weaving through the clues. Eleanor had vanished after a grand ball, leaving a note in her glove. "Meet me at the Old Oak at midnight." Her sapphire necklace, a gift from her fiancé, Lord Reginald Blackwood, was gone, too, sparking rumors of a lover, James Harrow, the painter, or foul play. Clara, the maid, had written of Eleanor's sad eyes and an argument with Reginald. Miss Marple's discoveries: a sapphire earring hidden in the oak tree, a letter in the manor's fountain, and crescent moon symbols marking the way proved Eleanor had planned her escape. Clara and possibly Harrow had helped, and the note was a decoy to mislead everyone. Miss Marple opened her notebook, reviewing her latest thoughts. The earring with its silver leaves was part of the necklace set shown in Harrow's painting. Hiding it suggested Eleanor had kept one piece as a memento, perhaps selling the rest to start anew. The letter, hidden in the fountain, declared her love for another and her refusal to marry Reginald. Crescent moons on the journal, ruins, fountain, bridge, and painting were a trail, guiding Miss Marple to the truth. Mrs. Grayson's grandmother, a kitchen maid, had helped Eleanor, and Clara's careful journal protected her secret. But where had Eleanor gone? That was the final question. She dressed in her neat skirt and blouse, pinning her hat against the morning breeze. Today she'd search village records for traces of Eleanor after 1925, a new name, a marriage, anything to show where she'd built her new life. The crescent moon on the bridge near the path from the manor hinted at her route. Marple tucked the earring and letter into her bag, along with her notebook and magnifying glass, and headed downstairs. Thomas waited in the inn's dining room, his tweed coat brushed clean. "Morning, Miss Marple," he said, grinning over a plate of eggs. "Got a plan for today?" "I reckon you're close to cracking this mystery." Miss Marple smiled, pouring tea. "I am, Thomas. We'll visit the church to check old records, marriages, births, anything from 1925 onward. Eleanor didn't vanish into thin air. She left a trail, and I mean to follow it." They finished breakfast and walked to the church, its steeple rising above Ashford's cobblestone streets. The air was crisp, with leaves swirling at their feet. The church was quiet, its wooden door creaking as they entered. "Miss Marple, I hear you're unraveling the manor mystery," he said, his eyes twinkling. "How can I help?" "I'd like to see your parish records," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Marriages and deaths. Starting from 1925, I'm looking for someone who might have come to Ashford or a nearby village around then." Reverend Ellis led them to a dusty room lined with leather-bound books. "These go back centuries," he said, pulling down a volume labeled 1925 to 1930. "Take your time. I'll be in the nave if you need me." Miss Marple and Thomas settled at a table, the book heavy in her hands. She turned the pages carefully, her eyes scanning names and dates. Marriages were listed in neat columns, couples, witnesses, and locations. She focused on 1926, thinking Eleanor might have waited a year to avoid suspicion. Halfway through, a name caught her eye: Ellen Harper, married to William Gray on June 12, 1926, in the nearby village of Willoughby. The witnesses were unfamiliar, but something tugged at her memory. "Thomas, is Willoughby far?" She asked, her finger on the entry. "About 5 miles, he said, leaning over. "Small place. quieter than Ashford. You think this Ellen is Eleanor? Perhaps, Miss Marple said, her mind racing. Shh. The names were close Ellen from Eleanor. A simple change. Shh. Copy the details into her notebook, noting the officiant's name, Reverend Hale. Let's check death records too. If Ellen was Eleanor, she might have stayed nearby. They opened another volume, scanning for Ellen or William Gray. In 1955, they found a death record for Ellen Gray, aged 50, in Willoughby. The cause was pneumonia, and her husband, William, was listed as surviving. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Ellen would have been about 20 in 1925, matching Eleanor's age. We need to visit Willoughby, she said. There might be more. Before leaving, Miss Marple asked Reverend Ellis about the bridge near the church with its crescent moon carving. Oh, that old thing, he said, chuckling. Folks say it was carved by a lovesick lad years ago. No one knows for sure. The bridge leads to the Willoughby Road, though. Miss Marple nodded, the pieces clicking. The bridge's crescent moon marked Alino's path to Willoughby. She thanked the Reverend and stepped outside with Thomas, the sun now high. We'll take a cart to Willoughby, she said. I want to see where Ellen Gray lived. Thomas arranged a ride with a farmer heading that way, and soon they were rattling along a dirt road, fields stretching golden on either side. Miss Marple clutched her bag, the earring, and letter inside. She pictured Eleanor crossing the bridge. That night, her sapphire necklace hidden, her heart set on freedom. The crescent moon was her signature, a sign she was safe. Willoughby was a tiny village, with a single street of cottages and a small church. They stopped at the churchyard, where gravestones leaned under ancient trees. Miss Marple walked the rows, her eyes sharp. Near the back, she found Etta Stone for Ellen Gray, 1905 to 1955, and William Gray, 1903 to 1968. Carved above their names was a crescent moon. There it is, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but triumphant. Eleanor's mark. Ellen was Eleanor. Thomas stared, his mouth open. Blimey, you found her. But how do you know for sure? Miss Marple pointed to the crescent moon. This symbol followed her. It's on the journal, the manor, the bridge, and now here. Eleanor chose a new name and a new life, but she left her mark for those who'd look. They visited Willoughby's vicarage, where the current reverend, a young woman named Miss Carter, welcomed them. Miss Marple asked about the Grays. Oh, they were lovely, Miss Carter said, checking old parish notes. William was a school teacher, kind and quiet. Ellen kept a garden and taught children to read. They had no children, but the village adored them. Ellen was buried with a sapphire earring, they say her favorite. Miss Marple's breath caught. The earring matched the one in her bag, the twin to the one under the oak. Did anyone know where Ellen came from? She asked. Miss Carter shook her head. She arrived in 1926, they say, kept to herself about her past. Some thought she was hiding from something, but she was so gentle, no one pried. Miss Marple thanked her, her mind complete. Eleanor had become Ellen, married William, and lived happily, far from the manor's scandals. The sapphire earring buried with her was the other half of the set, the pendant likely sold to fund her new life. The crescent moons were her way of tying her old life to her new one, a secret for those who'd understand. Back in Ashford, Miss Marple and Thomas met with Mr. Finch, the museum curator, to share her findings. They sat in the inn's parlor, the fire crackling. Eleanor didn't run off with Harrow or die, Miss Marple said, her voice steady. She staged her disappearance to escape Reginald. Clara helped, hiding the journal. Harrow painted the crescent moon to honor her plan. The note in her glove was a trick to make people think she'd eloped. She left the earring and letter as proof, marked by crescent moons for someone to find later. Asterisk. Mr. Finch's eyes widened. That's astonishing. But who was the other she loved? William Gray, Miss Marple said. A school teacher, not a painter. Harrow was a friend, maybe a decoy to confuse Reginald. Eleanor crossed the bridge to Willoughby, became Ellen, and lived the life she chose. Thomas grinned. "You're a marvel, Miss Marple. 100 years, and you sorted it out?" She smiled, folding her hands. People are capable of remarkable things when they follow their hearts. Eleanor was brave, and Clara was loyal. Their secret was safe until now. Mr. Finch promised to update the museum's records, turning Eleanor's story from tragedy to triumph. Miss Marple gave him the earring and letter to display with Harrow's painting. "Let her story be told," she said. "She earned it." The next day, Miss Marple packed her bag, the journal tucked inside. She'd write to Mr. Weston, the solicitor, with her findings. As she boarded the train to St. Mary Mead, Ashford's Hills faded behind her. She leaned back, her knitting needles clicking, already thinking of her garden and her next puzzle. The train rattled on, and Miss Marple smiled. A century-old mystery solved by listening to the past. "Well done, Eleanor," she thought. "Well done."